Hey, what is up, guys, and welcome back to another Gotham Knights commentary. So I wanted to talk about when we can expect to see more content from Gotham Knights. Obviously, the Game Awards were just a few days ago, and I'm very curious to know what you guys thought of the Game Awards. Obviously, The Last of Us 2 pretty much dominated and swept all of it. By the way, before we get into the video, if you enjoy it, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and it really helps to share my content in the YouTube algorithm. So anyway, yeah, I mean, basically they dominated, Last of Us 2 dominated at the Game Awards. Not really surprising. It was perhaps surprising the extent to which they dominated, but nonetheless, they pretty much won everything. And I'm curious to see if Gotham Knights could even maybe do something at the Game Awards. We'll have to wait and see, but I think that there is still more work to be done on the game. I don't see the game coming out before summer, and I actually think the game is probably going to come out in October or November. I would be curious to ask somebody like K-Wing, for instance, who has more experience in the video game industry. You know, I think he has about as much video game experience as I have years lived in my life. So he'd probably be able to provide a more accurate prediction of when the game will actually come out. But I think that in this case, with this game in particular, it really seems as though there is more work to be done on the game. So I wanted to go over the first major marketing campaign of Gotham Knights, and that is the Knighthood marketing campaign. So this marketing campaign kind of incorporates the fans in the sense that they can send in fan art, and then that fan art is featured on their Twitter account. So they started this campaign back in September. On September 24th, they started with Batgirl, who was the first character that they showed. So they showed this sort of infographic that'll flash up here where they're advertising what the characters look like and their armor, what exactly is a part of their suit. So you get a little bit of backstory on what the character looks like and their outfit and whatnot. So we got that from Batgirl, and it looked like each character lasted for 2 weeks, roughly, because Batgirl started on September 24th. People sent in their fan art. They showed off her armor, and they showed off her batsuit, and they showed some pictures and GIFs and that type of thing for about 2 weeks, and then they moved on to Robin. Robin was the second character who started on October 15th, which is actually almost a month there. So then we had Robin, and then we got to Nightwing on November 4th. That started about 2 weeks after the Robin one. And Red Hood just started on December 8th. So it looks like we have about a week and a half until this Knighthood campaign is completely over. We've gone through all 4 of the characters, and then we will be heading into our next marketing campaign for the game. Now, I anticipate that this next marketing campaign is probably going to focus more on the plot and the villains for the game. Interestingly enough, obviously quite unusual, we've already seen gameplay. I would say that gameplay is probably going to come early of next year, but I think as early as January, we can start to see some stuff with the Court of Owls, and they're probably going to launch a marketing campaign around some of the villains in the game. We might even get a similar Knighthood campaign where every couple weeks we get a spotlight on one of the villains. So, for, these next 2 weeks, we're going to see, for instance, Mr. Freeze, and then after that, we'll get a highlight of the Joker, and then Bane, and then at the end of it, we'll talk about whatever, the Court of Owls or whoever they want to highlight. As for the release date, I've seen a lot of people very optimistic that the game could come out in early of 2021. I do think that is very, very optimistic, because the main thing with this game is that it's going to need work. It's going to need more work. People forget that when this game was announced, it received a lot of negative backlash, and this has slowly petered away over the months, which I think is good, because I thought that the backlash wasn't really warranted. It seemed to me to be as though fans were just shocked that the game wasn't a Batman game, and their initial gut reaction was negative. And over time, I've seen fans become more acclimated to the fact that it is actually, a Batgirl and Robin game, and people aren't used to that. But some fans are concerned by the gameplay as well, and I think I am a little bit as well. When you look at Marvel's Avengers, which was just a huge flop, I think that in superhero video games thus far, we've had 2 major categories of games. So on one hand, we've had more of like the DC Universe Online, Marvel's Avengers, more like, I guess you could say RPG type of games. Certainly Marvel's Avengers would fall more into the RPG category than anything else. And then you have other types of games, which are more single player story-driven games. That would be, I would say, the Batman Arkham games and Spider-Man PS4 most prominently in recent years, but also the old Spider-Man games would fall into that category. And then in the third category, I guess, if we're to create that, would be Gotham City Imposters, which, by the way, was a really fun game, and I'd love to see Gotham City Imposters 2. It's been a fan favorite, requested by a lot of people, but anyway. So I wouldn't really count that because it's like maybe 2 or 3 games in total in the last 2 decades would fit into that like shooter category for superhero games. There was a Punisher game back in the early 2000s, so there've been a couple, but not really anything to write home about. So it's pretty much like, okay, are you going to go the MMORPG route? Are you going to go the Marvel's Avengers route? Or are you going to go the single player compelling story route, which is Batman Arkham, Spider-Man, PS4? And in the case of Gotham Knights, I think it is between both of those. Because clearly it is not like Batman Arkham City or Batman Arkham Knight. Batman Arkham Knight, Batman Arkham City, Arkham Asylum, Arkham Origins, they all take place in one day. Spider-Man PS4 is a very compact, linear story where you go from one mission to the next. It's totally an on-rails experience. They have already stated that this game is not that. This game is not an on-rails experience. Like, everybody's playthrough is going to be a little bit different to get to the ending. I think that the way that's going to functionally work is that you can address different villains at different times, and that maybe all the side missions are going to be required, so you actually have to defeat all the villains. For instance, Mr. Freeze in this game seems to be a side villain, and he has this plot to basically freeze the entire city, and you have to stop him as Batgirl and Robin and whatever, and then you go and you try to stop him, and that's his plot. It's like he's trying to freeze the entire city, and then kind of similar to Batman Arkham Knight, like, oh, whatever, Penguin's trying to rob banks or whatever he's trying to do. Perhaps Mr. Freeze is incorporated in the main story. I certainly would prefer that. That's more of the Arkham City model, where every villain has a main role in the story. That's what made Arkham City, to me, so compelling, whereas Arkham Knight was not as compelling, where there are 2 main villains and all the others are basically irrelevant, and it doesn't even matter if you do the mission. They might as well not even be in the story, right? So I think that is the main distinction between those 2 games. But my point being with saying all of that is there are aspects from Marvel's Avengers that I recognize in the game. I certainly think this game will be much better than Marvel's Avengers. But, there are level numbers above every single person's head, both player and enemy. That is Marvel's Avengers written all over it. I mean, plainly put, that is unlike anything we've seen in the Batman Arkham games. We've certainly never seen it in Spider-Man PS4. That is a little bit concerning, because here's the thing. Marvel's Avengers was a colossal failure. The game only lost, $72 million? It was a total colossal failure. Nothing about the game worked. The story was terrible. I wouldn't say it's terrible. The story wasn't good enough for me to even finish it. I literally am a YouTuber for superhero video games. I couldn't fucking play it. I couldn't finish it. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do any of the missions. I'd play with Salvage, and I'd play with Evan Falarka, and I'd play with all my friends, and we would just be fighting this robot for 20 minutes. I'm like, what the fuck is this? I mean, just fighting these AI robots over and over again. I mean, it was the most boring experience I've ever had playing video games. It was the most uninspired, lame, boring gaming experience I've ever had. It was just terrible. And I don't want this game to be anything like that, obviously. And when you look at superhero video games, there is one model that has consistently and clearly worked, and that is the Batman Arkham Spider-Man PS4 model. Period. Anything else is a risk. Now, DC Universe Online and games like it have had some success. This game clearly looks a lot better than DC Universe Online, but nothing about Marvel's Avengers worked. And fans should be concerned if they recognize any similarities. It's really in the eye of the beholder. For some people, it's like, no, I don't recognize it. Like, it's clearly its own thing. I don't even think it's in the same league. For other people, they're like, this really, really reminds me of Marvel's Avengers. And if that's you, when you play the game, you're going to feel like you're playing Marvel's Avengers with Robin, perhaps. And that's why I think that there's going to be more work done to the game. I think that some of those fundamental gameplay mechanics will be evolved because of the failure of Marvel's Avengers. And when you look at the game, clearly they have their own inspired vision. Again, I'm not saying in any way that this game is Marvel's Avengers for DC. I'm just saying that there are some aspects that you could argue are a little bit similar. And for some people, that's going to be a huge red flag and will certainly give them negative reviews. And if we're trying to target, if they're trying to target like Batman Arkham level reviews, like 9.5, 9.6, masterpiece, great superhero video game, whatever, then they're going to need to be very careful about, utilizing any of those aspects, right? Because, as I mentioned, the only thing in the superhero video game genre that has consistently and regularly worked is that linear compelling single-player story mission, basically taking what could be a movie or an animated film or a comic book run and turning it into a playable experience in game. And that's why I think like when you have Batman Arkham right here and you have Marvel's Avengers here, Gotham Knights to me is somewhere in the middle. And I think that in the next year, we might see some aspects of that gameplay development cycle move a little bit more towards Arkham than to Marvel's Avengers, for obvious reasons, because fans don't like that type of game. It's not just that, people found Kamala Khan annoying, which it was. Making like a 13-year-old the protagonist of the game, not a great idea. Even though, sure, she's plenty likable and it's unique and interesting and different than just following, Captain America like in the MCU. I thought that was an interesting decision. It could have worked, but I mean, she's literally like a 14-year-old child in the game. That's not a protagonist that people like want to necessarily play, obviously. And with that in mind, there are so many things that, Marvel's Avengers, I can't even, like the gameplay is boring and sucks. The AI enemy and, boring. The enemies that you fight are terribly boring. There's no open world, which is one advantage Gotham Knights already has over it. The gadgets are boring. The abilities are lame. When you're Iron Man, you can't even fly like beyond 10 feet in the air. There's just so much wrong with the game. And I don't think that Gotham Knights will make even half of those mistakes. But even if they make like a quarter of those mistakes, that's going to be bad. That's going to be bad for them. Because at this point, Marvel's Avengers was such a colossal failure, and it is so universally hated that anything even vaguely resembling it is going to be like a kiss of death. It's just like, it's bad. It is bad. When you look on Twitter and you see the fan response Marvels, literally like 200 people are playing it on Steam right now. Destiny has like 50,000 people. That game came out 10 years ago, Destiny 2 came out, we'll say 3-4 years ago. And it has at least 150, if not 200 times more people playing it right now than Marvel's Avengers, which just came out a few weeks ago, which is literally based on the MCU pretty much in terms of the character models and that type of thing. And they can't even get 200 people to play it. It's just not the type of game experience that people want. And when you try to make it too expansive and you try to make it like, we're going to keep evolving it and we're going to make it so that you can play it for years to come, it's like, that's all fine and good. You're certainly welcome to attempt that, but you're honestly better off trying to do that with like an Arkham Origins multiplayer type of thing than through, we're going to make you want to loot and fight AI for like years to come. And the fun part about free roaming in the Arkham games is that you're immersed in the world. You feel like you're being dropped into the story, right? And if it's just like, if it doesn't feel like that, if it doesn't feel like we're playing an immersive, compelling single-player story game, and obviously it's dual player, but I mean single player in the sense that it's like a compelling story that isn't just like some loot game, where we're just going around and looting different objectives, Again, I certainly don't think that this is even remotely on the level of Marvel's Avengers. This game will be vastly better than Marvel's Avengers. So don't get me wrong there at all. But I think I'm saying all of this to note that in terms of a release date, I would not expect this by summer. Because even if they wanted or were planning to do summer, I'm going to bet money that they're making some tweaks to address some of that initial fan feedback about the MMO, like loot RPG aspects of the game, because those critiques aren't going to go away, and they're only going to be amplified when the game comes out. When the game comes out and they're still there, that's going to be a problem for them. The gameplay is probably going to have to be evolved in some way. And that's just the honest truth. Now, the reality is we can't see the HUD in the game. So, like, I don't know exactly what's happening. The gameplay seems pretty fun to me. To some people, it looks too much like Marvel's Avengers. And I just don't know that we're going to be able to know fully until the game comes out. But certainly some gameplay with HUD, and I think showing off some other missions. That Mr. Freeze boss fight was a mistake to show because, of course, our mind goes to Arkham City. And what they're trying to do with this game is create their own IP. Arkham Origins, they were in the shadow of Batman Arkham City, and they just got overshadowed by Rocksteady. And because they were trying to emulate what Rocksteady did without really substantially evolving that model in any real way, and that didn't work out for them particularly well. So now they're just saying, we're going to build our own thing. We are W Montreal. We are not Rocksteady. We're not even trying to be Rocksteady, which I think is good. That's what they should be doing. But the problem is that there are some things in the gameplay that fans are just concerned about, and there are things in superhero video games as a genre that people just don't tolerate. Like, there are just some mechanics of Marvel's Avengers that you can never make work, that can literally never exist, that will be received positively. And I don't know that any of those particular mechanics are in Gotham Knights, but they might be. And I think that with Marvel's Avengers, there's a lot to learn from that game. And that's all I'm saying, is that Gotham Knights is going to be a lot better than Marvel's Avengers. As it is, it's probably a lot better than Marvel's Avengers. But they are going to be able to take mental notes of the huge historic failure that was Marvel's Avengers, a really unfortunate failure. Like, people are going to lose their livelihoods and jobs and incomes because of that game being a failure. So I don't take any pride, or I'm not happy that the game failed in any way. But we've got to be honest. That game was a fucking failure, man. Oh my God. That game was not good. It is not a good video game. And they have to be cognizant of that. And I think that it's really the case, if they released this game 5 years ago, then they could look at other superhero video games that were coming out around that time and make notes of, this is what works, this is what doesn't, this is what the audience likes, this is what the audience doesn't like. And the reality of it is, as much as people want to emphasize, game reviews with CD Projekt Red, they just came out the other day, the creators of Cyberpunk, that they were going to have bonuses and incentive structures that if the game gets a certain review on Metacritic, that they get bonuses and whatnot. I mean, but these video games are made for fans. They're made not only for fans, they're made for purchases. Like, they're trying to get people to buy the game. The game can get a 10 out of 10, as many indie games do on IGN that you've never even heard of, that get 10 out of 10s. You've never heard of them because nobody buys them. And the reality of it is, just like in the movie industry, just like anything in entertainment, it's all about sales. It's all about money and revenue. And so I think with all that being said, nobody bought Marvel's Avengers, and tons of people bought a lot of other superhero video games. Even Injustice 2 to a lesser extent, which sells, like, I would say mediocre to the lower end of mediocre, whereas Batman Arkham sells phenomenally. Spider-Man PS4 sells phenomenally. And that's going to be something that they, I think, really look at deeply. And so I say all of that to say, I would not expect this game before summer. I'm probably going to say October, November, honestly. It's probably going to be a year before we see it. So with that being said, I do anticipate that there's going to be more gameplay, more trailers hitting in Q1 of 2021, so in the next couple months here. But I wouldn't anticipate any announcement regarding, the game's coming out like tomorrow. I do think there's a possibility that in February area we could get a release date. And as I said, I do think that release date is going to be November. So that's my prediction for the release date, my official updated prediction. And I really hope I'm wrong, because as many people have acutely noted, my predictions are not particularly accurate when it comes to this game, this particular project. First of all, going back many years, like, I was hopeful that it would be at the Game Awards in like 2016. Way long time ago. It's now going on 2021, and we still don't have the game. So I wouldn't really listen to me on when we're going to get the game, but that's my 2 cents. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Let me know what you think about the Gotham Knights gameplay that we've seen thus far, and when we can anticipate the game in the comment section below. My name is Slick Moth. See you guys in the next video. Peace out.